The evening sky over Los Angeles glowed with warm colors, soft orange, deep red, and gentle purple. The sun was setting and the city lights were starting to turn on, one by one. It was a peaceful sight, but Keanu Reeves hardly noticed it. He stepped out of his car, taking a deep breath. He had not been here in a very long time. In front of him stood his old high school, still strong, still standing just like it had all those years ago. Looking at it now, he felt like a teenager again. The invitation had arrived a few weeks ago, a letter asking him to come back for a special event, a fundraiser to help kids who didn't have much money for school. That was important to him, so he had said yes. Now, as he walked across the familiar pavement of the schoolyard, memories began to come back. He could almost hear the sounds, the slam of lockers, the chatter of students hurrying to class, the laughter of friends standing in groups. It felt like stepping into the past. But then something caught his eye. In the distance, someone was moving slowly along a hallway. A mop glided across the floor. A bucket rolled softly beside it. Keanu stopped. His heart beat faster. That way of walking, that posture, it was familiar. He squinted in the dim light. Could it really be? Keanu took a step forward. His boots made a quiet thudding sound against the concrete. The hallway lights flickered, making long shadows stretch across the floor. And then, finally, the man turned around. Keanu felt his breath catch in his throat. It was him. The same weathered face. The same kind eyes, now framed by deep wrinkles of age. Mr. Morales? Keanu whispered. The elderly janitor lifted his head. His tired eyes squinted slightly, trying to recognize the voice. At first, he just gave a polite nod as if Keanu were just another visitor. But then, something changed. A veil seemed to lift from his memory. Keanu, he said, his voice rough but warm. Keanu let out a small, almost incredulous laugh. It's been a long time. Mr. Morales gave a slow nod. His gaze drifted over Keanu, as if he were seeing both the past and present at the same time. A very long time. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Keanu had always known Mr. Morales as the quiet man who cleaned the school hallways. He was always there, but never in the spotlight. A man who worked hard, never complained, and never asked for attention. But even as a teenager, Keanu had noticed something. Mr. Morales saw things. He noticed the kids who felt invisible. He noticed the ones who struggled but never spoke up. And suddenly, Keanu's mind was pulled back to the past. A teenage Keanu sat alone in the school gym, staring at the floor. His mind was full of frustration. He had failed a test. His coach had yelled at him during practice. Home wasn't easy either. Nothing felt right. He had planned to sit there alone until the hallways emptied. Then footsteps. A shadow moved over him. A deep but gentle voice spoke. Tough day. Keanu didn't look up. He just nodded. Mr. Morales didn't ask any more questions. He simply sat down next to him, placing his mop bucket on the floor. You know, he said after a moment, people think I just clean floors. Keanu glanced at him, confused. But I see everything, Mr. Morales continued. I see kids who think no one notices them. I see the ones who fight battles no one knows about. There was a pause. Then he added, You're not as invisible as you think, kid. At the time, Keanu hadn't understood the meaning of those words. He had just nodded and let them pass. But now, standing here decades later, he realized something. Mr. Morales had been watching over him long before Keanu even knew how much he needed it. Keanu blinked and returned to the present. He looked at the man before him. Time had changed him. His face was lined with deep wrinkles. His dark hair was now completely white. His uniform, though clean, was old and worn out. His hands, rough from years of hard work, gripped the mop handle with quiet strength. But what struck Keanu most was not his age. It was the exhaustion in his eyes. How many years had Mr. Morales been doing this? How many floors had he scrubbed? How many classrooms had he cleaned? And most importantly, why was he still here? Keanu forced a smile. I never expected to find you here, Mr. Morales. Mr. Morales chuckled softly, shaking his head. I never left. He said it lightly like a joke. But Keanu could hear something else hidden in his voice. He looked down at the mop bucket, the wet floor, the old ID badge clipped to Mr. Morales' chest. And then the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. He was still working here. Keanu felt his stomach tighten. Mr. Morales, are you still working full-time? The old man hesitated before nodding. Work keeps me moving. You know how it is. But Keanu knew that wasn't the real answer. He looked more closely. The slight tremble in Mr. Morales' fingers. The way he shifted his weight as if his legs ached. The tired slump of his shoulders. This wasn't just a job. This was survival. Keanu felt a deep sadness creep over him. An 80-year-old man shouldn't still be working like this. Not cleaning floors. Not carrying the weight of an entire school on his shoulders. And suddenly Keanu needed to know the truth. Why are you still working here, Mr. Morales? For the first time, Mr. Morales didn't answer right away. A shadow crossed his face. He hesitated. And that hesitation told Keanu everything. Keanu couldn't stop thinking about him. Sitting in his home, he replayed the moment in his head. The weary smile. The hunched posture. The faded uniform. Why was he still working? There was only one way to find out. Keanu returned to the school. No cameras. No event organizers. Just him. He walked straight to the maintenance area, where the janitor's office was hidden in a small corner of the school. The door was slightly open. Inside, Mr. Morales sat at a tiny metal desk, carefully sewing a tear in his shirt. His hands moved slowly, showing signs of age. Keanu knocked gently. Mr. Morales? The old man looked up, surprised. Keanu? Back so soon? Keanu smiled, stepping inside. I had to come back. I couldn't stop thinking about you. Mr. Morales chuckled. No need to worry about an old janitor like me. But Keanu wasn't convinced. He sat across from him, watching him carefully. Then he asked the question that had been heavy on his heart. Why are you still working here, Mr. Morales? Silence filled the small room. Mr. Morales sighed. He put the needle down. Because I have no choice, son. Keanu leaned forward, listening. My pension isn't enough, Mr. Morales said quietly. I worked my whole life, but the little money I get each month, it barely pays for rent and food. Prices went up, but my paycheck stayed the same. Keanu's heart sank. Mr. Morales wasn't working because he wanted to. He was working because he had no other choice. Keanu felt his jaw tighten. He looked at Mr. Morales carefully and asked, Do you have any family who can help you? The old janitor shook his head slowly. No family left, he said in a quiet voice. My wife passed away years ago. We never had kids. It's just me now. Keanu's chest ached. Now he could see it, the exhaustion in Mr. Morales' body, the sadness in his voice. This man had spent his whole life working hard, making sure the school was clean and safe for students, but now, when he needed help, no one was there for him. Keanu noticed something else. Mr. Morales rubbed his knee absent-mindedly and winced slightly as if in pain. Are you hurt? Keanu asked. Mr. Morales hesitated, then nodded. It's my knee. The doctor says I need surgery, but I can't afford it. And if I stop working, I won't be able to pay my bills. So I'll just keep going. Keanu clenched his fists. It wasn't fair. This man had worked so hard for so long, and now he was struggling just to survive. How could someone who gave so much receive so little in return? But feeling sad or angry wouldn't fix anything. Keanu knew what he had to do. That night, Keanu lay on his couch, staring at the ceiling. The city outside was alive. Cars honking, lights flashing, people laughing. But Keanu's mind was somewhere else. He thought about Mr. Morales. The old man had spent decades cleaning floors, fixing broken things, and making sure the school was in good shape. But more than that, he had been kind. He had always been there for the students, helping them in small but important ways. Keanu remembered his own school days. Mr. Morales had been there when Keanu needed a quiet moment, a piece of advice, or even just a smile on a hard day. Mr. Morales had watched over the kids, making sure they were okay even when no one noticed. And now, at almost 80 years old, he was still working, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. Keanu sat up. He couldn't just let this go. He had to help. But how? Pulling out his phone, he made a few calls. First, he called an old friend who knew about jobs and money. Tell me about retirement for school janitors, Keanu said. The answer made his stomach turn. Retired janitors didn't get much money. Their pensions were too small. In a city like Toronto, they could barely afford rent, food, or doctor bills. Many of them kept working even when they were too old or too sick. Keanu's jaw tightened. Mr. Morales had spent his life serving others, and in return, society had given him nothing. That wasn't right. Keanu grabbed a notebook and started writing down ideas. Giving Mr. Morales money wouldn't be enough. Donations didn't last forever. Charity was nice, but it faded. Then, suddenly, an idea hit him. Mr. Morales wasn't just a janitor. He was a mentor. He had taught kids lessons about life without even realizing it. What if the school could pay him for that instead? Keanu underlined the words, Life Lessons with Mr. Morales, a mentorship program. This way, Mr. Morales wouldn't feel like he was getting charity. He would still have a job, but it would be something new, something bigger. Keanu closed the notebook. He had a plan. But the hardest part was still ahead, convincing Mr. Morales accepted it. The next day, Keanu walked through the school determined. He found Mr. Morales in the janitor's closet, fixing an old broom. "Back again, Keanu?" the old man asked with a smile. "Told you I can't stay away," Keanu replied, leaning against the doorframe. Mr. Morales chuckled. "What's really on your mind, kid?" Keanu took a deep breath. "You." Mr. Morales stopped moving. Keanu continued, "Your knee is getting worse and you know it. You need surgery and I'm going to take care of it." The old man frowned and shook his head. "I don't take handouts, Keanu." Keanu expected this answer. He smiled and pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "It's not a handout," he said. "It's a job requirement." Mr. Morales raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" Keanu placed the paper on the desk. "A mentorship program. You won't be a janitor anymore. You'll be a mentor teaching kids about life, hard work, and resilience. But you can't do that while limping around in pain. So, the surgery? It's not charity. It's part of your new job." Mr. Morales stared at the paper. His fingers traced the words, "Life Lessons with Mr. Morales, a mentorship program." Keanu could see the battle in his mind. Mr. Morales didn't want to stop working because working gave him purpose. But this wasn't stopping. This was becoming something greater. Mr. Morales let out a slow breath. "And what if I say no?" Keanu shrugged, grinning. "Then I'll keep coming back until you say yes." There was a pause. Then Mr. Morales chuckled, shaking his head. "You always were a stubborn kid." Keanu smirked. "Learn from the best." Mr. Morales picked up the paper, reading it one more time. Then finally he sighed. "Guess I don't have a choice, huh?" Keanu grinned. "Nope." Within weeks, Mr. Morales had his knee surgery. Keanu made sure he got the best doctors and the best care. When Mr. Morales woke up, still groggy from the anesthesia, Keanu was sitting beside him, arms crossed, smirking. "You better heal fast, old man. The kids are waiting." Mr. Morales chuckled softly. He had a new purpose now. Keanu had set up the mentorship program at the school. When Mr. Morales returned, he wasn't holding a mop or fixing broken lockers. Instead, he sat in a classroom talking to students. He told them stories about life, about working hard, about never giving up. He taught them the things no textbooks could teach. And the students loved him. For the first time in a long time, Mr. Morales didn't feel like just a janitor. He felt important. He felt needed. One day after class, a student walked up to him. "Mr. Morales, do you think I can be something great someday?" Mr. Morales smiled warmly. "Kid, you already are." And for the first time in a long time, Mr. Morales felt something deep in his heart. He felt happy. The mentorship program was a success, but Keanu knew there was still one big challenge ahead. Would the school allow it to continue? Would the principal see Mr. Morales as more than just a janitor? Keanu wasn't going to stop until he made sure the answer was yes. Because people like Mr. Morales deserved more than just thanks. They deserved respect. And Keanu wasn't going to let him be forgotten. Not now. Not ever. Mr. Morales reached for a small bag beside his bed. He pulled out an old, worn notebook. The leather cover was torn and the pages were yellow. He held it for a moment, then gave it to Keanu. "I found this a long time ago," Mr. Morales said. "Back when you were a kid. You threw it away." Keanu frowned and opened the notebook. His heart skipped a beat. It was his handwriting. Page after page was filled with messy, rushed words. His thoughts, his fears, his questions. Words he had forgotten. Words from a boy who once felt lost. Keanu read one of the pages out loud. "I don't know if I belong anywhere. Sometimes it feels like I could disappear and no one would notice. I want to be someone, but I don't know how." His chest felt tight. He had forgotten about this younger version of himself. The one who felt unsure, the one who didn't know where he belonged. But Mr. Morales hadn't forgotten. He had saved the notebook all these years. Keanu looked up at the old man. "Why did you keep this?" Mr. Morales looked at him kindly. "Because even back then, I knew you were going to be someone great. And I wanted you to remember where you came from." Silence filled the room. Keanu felt a lump in his throat. All these years, he had thought he had made it on his own. But he hadn't. Someone had seen him when he thought he was invisible. Someone had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. And now, after all these years, Keanu was ready to do the same for the kids at his school. He closed the notebook gently, running his hand over the worn leather. "Thank you," he said softly. Mr. Morales smiled. "It was never just about cleaning floors, Keanu. It was always about looking out for kids like you. That night, Keanu sat alone in his apartment. The city lights twinkled outside his window. The old notebook lay open on his lap. The words inside were full of fear, doubt, and loneliness, feelings he had pushed away long ago. But one passage made him stop and stare. If I ever make it, if I ever become someone, I hope I remember what it was like to feel lost. I hope I never forget that sometimes all a person needs is for someone to believe in them. Keanu let out a deep breath. Mr. Morales had believed in him before he ever believed in himself. Now it was his turn. He shut the notebook, feeling a new sense of purpose in his heart. No child in that school would ever feel invisible again. Weeks later, Keanu and Mr. Morales stood in front of a brand new building at the school. A big sign above the door read, "The Morales Educational Center. A place for second chances." Mr. Morales stared at the sign, his hands gripping his cane tightly. "Keanu, you didn't have to do this," he said. Keanu grinned. "No arguments. It's already built." The old man sighed and shook his head. "You always were stubborn." Keanu smirked. "I learned from the best." Mr. Morales had a new purpose now. But Keanu had one more surprise for him, something he never expected. At the airport was busy. People rushed past, talking and rolling their suitcases. But in one quiet corner, something very special was happening. Mr. Morales stood beside his small, worn suitcase. His hands gripped the handle tightly. His ticket was tucked into his coat pocket. For the first time in a long, long time, he wasn't thinking about work. He wasn't thinking about mops, floors, or late-night shifts. He was thinking about his brother. The brother he hadn't seen in almost 40 years. Keanu stood beside him, hands in his pockets, watching the old man with a small smile. "You ready for this?" Keanu asked. Mr. Morales chuckled. "I spent my whole life making sure other people were okay. Maybe it's time I let someone take care of me." Keanu nodded. "Your brother is going to be happy to see you." The old man swallowed hard. His voice was quiet. "I hope so." There was a moment of silence. Then Mr. Morales turned to Keanu, his expression soft. "You've done a lot for me, kid," he said. "But you know something?" Keanu tilted his head. "What's that?" A small smile formed on Mr. Morales's face. "You were always a good kid. I just helped you see it." Keanu felt a lump in his throat. The final boarding call echoed through the airport. Mr. Morales gripped Keanu's shoulder for a moment, then picked up his suitcase. "See you around, kid." Keanu gave him a nod. "See you around, old man." And with that, Mr. Morales walked through the gate, stepping into the next chapter of his life. As Keanu left the airport, he reached into his jacket and pulled out the notebook. He flipped to the last page. And there, in his own teenage handwriting, were the words, "If I ever make it, I hope I never forget what it feels like to be lost. And if I can, I'll help someone else find their way." Keanu let out a quiet chuckle and shook his head, because now he knew he had never really been alone. And because of Mr. Morales, neither would the next generation of kids. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more exciting stories filled with adventure, mystery, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories coming and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.